The training hall fell silent when Instructor walked through the main doors. His four legs clicked against the metal floor in a rhythm that every cadet had learned to fear. The tall figure stood nearly 8 feet high, and his compound eyes reflected the overhead lights like black mirrors. Behind him, two security guards pushed a hovering containment cage covered in thick cloth. Morgan sat in the third row among the other cadets. She was one of only 5 humans at the Galactic Military Academy on Prime. The alliance between Earth and the Galactic Council was still new, and humans remained a mystery to most species in known space. Kept her hands folded in her lap and watched the covered cage with mild curiosity. Beside her, a cadet named shifted nervously on his bench. His green scales had turned pale, and his tail twitched against the floor. He leaned toward and whispered in a shaking voice that he had heard rumors about today's lesson, nodded but said nothing. She had learned that rumors on this station were usually worse than reality. Reached the center of the hall and raised one of his 4 arms for attention. His voice came out in sharp clicks that the translator devices turned into words. He announced that today's lesson would focus on fear conditioning. Every soldier needed to understand the dangers of hostile fauna across the galaxy. He explained that most species evolved on worlds where nature was gentle and balanced, but some worlds produced creatures of terrible violence. These were called, and their beasts were classified by danger level. The instructor paused for effect. He then said that Earth was classified as a Category 9. This was nearly the highest rating possible. Several cadets turned to look at the human students with new fear in their eyes, kept her expression calm. She was used to this reaction by now. Continued his lecture. He said that most species could not survive on Earth for more than a few days. The planet was filled with predators, toxins, extreme weather, and diseases that evolved to kill. Everything on Earth was designed by nature to destroy. He clicked his mandibles together and added that today they would see one of Earth's creatures up close. The security guards pulled the cloth away from the cage. Inside, a large animal paced back and forth. It had thick fur the color of brown and black, pointed ears that stood upright, and a long snout filled with visible teeth. Its eyes were alert and watchful. A low growl came from its throat as it looked at the alien faces surrounding it. Panic spread through the cadets immediately. Several jumped from their seats and backed toward the walls. Others froze in place, their bodies rigid with terror, made a high-pitched sound and grabbed his arm with his clawed hand. He begged her to run before the beast broke free. Looked at the cage and felt her heart skip a beat, but it was not from fear, it was from recognition. She gently removed his grip from her arm and told him to stay calm. She said the creature would not hurt anyone. Noticed that the human female had not fled like the others. He pointed at her with one long arm and announced that this cadet showed unusual courage. He said perhaps humans had grown numb to fear after living among such monsters. He warned her that numbness would not save her if the beast attacked. Stood up slowly. Every eye in the room turned to her. She asked the instructor for permission to approach the cage. Her voice was steady and clear. The hall went completely silent. Even the creature in the cage stopped packing and tilted its head at the sound of her voice. His compound eyes flickered with what might have been surprise. He asked if she wished to die as a demonstration for her classmates. Shook her head. She said the creature was not what he thought it was. She asked again for permission to approach, promising that she could prove her words. Considered this for a long moment. He then waved one arm toward the cage and told her to proceed. He ordered the security guards to ready their weapons. If the beast attacked, they would fire immediately. He added that her death would at least teach the others an important lesson about overconfidence. Walked down the center aisle between the benches. The other cadets pressed themselves away from her as she passed. She could hear their frightened breathing and the scratch of claws against the floor as they retreated, but she kept her eyes on the cage and the animal inside. The creature watched her approach. Its ears rotated forward and its nose twitched as it caught her scent. The growling had stopped. Now it made a different sound, a soft whine that came from deep in its chest. Its tail, which had been tucked low, began to move slowly from side to side. Reached the cage and knelt down on one knee. She was now at eye level with the animal. She spoke in a soft voice and told it that everything was okay. She said it must be scared and confused, but she was here now. She slowly raised her hand, palm facing up, and held it near the bars of the cage. The creature stretched its neck forward and sniffed her fingers. Its wet nose touched her skin and its tail began to wag faster. The whining grew louder, more urgent. It sounded like a plea. Behind her, heard gasps of horror from the cadets. Someone shouted for her to pull her hand back before the beast bit it off, but ignored them. She pushed her fingers through the bars and scratched the creature gently under its chin. The animal's response was immediate. It pressed its head against her hand and closed its eyes. A sound came from its throat that was not a growl. It was something closer to contentment. The tail wagged so hard that the whole back half of its body moved with it. Stepped forward, his legs clicking rapidly. He demanded to know what she was doing to the beast. He asked what kind of mental control humans possessed over creatures. Looked over her shoulder at the instructor. She was smiling now, the first real smile she had shown since arriving at the academy. She told him there was no mind control. This animal was called a dog. It was a German shepherd, one of the most loyal and loving breeds on Earth. Humans had lived alongside dogs for thousands of years. They were not monsters. They were family. She turned back to the cage and continued petting the dog through the bars. It had rolled onto its side now, offering its belly for scratches. Its tongue hung out of its mouth in pure happiness. The cadets stared in disbelief. Instructor stood frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. The beast that was supposed to teach a lesson in fear had become something else entirely. It had become proof that humans were stranger and more frightening than anyone had imagined. Not because they fought monsters, but because they made friends with them. The training hall remained frozen in confusion. Cadets pressed against the walls, their eyes fixed on the impossible scene before them. A human female knelt beside a cage containing one of the most dangerous creatures they had ever seen, and the beast was wagging its tail like it had found a long-lost friend. Instructor recovered from his shock and moved closer. His four legs carried him in a wide circle around and the cage, keeping what he considered a safe distance. He demanded an explanation. He said the creature had been found on a crashed human cargo vessel near the outer colonies. The recovery team had classified it as hostile after it attacked two of their members. Kept her hand on the dog's head, scratching behind its ears in slow, gentle motions. She explained that the dog was probably terrified and defending itself. She asked how the recovery team had approached it. Had they surrounded it with weapons? Had they made loud noises or sudden movements? Admitted that standard containment protocols had been followed. The team had used stun weapons and restraint nets. The beast had fought for nearly an hour before it was finally captured. Nodded sadly. She said that the dog had been scared and alone. It had done what any loyal creature would do when faced with unknown threats. It had tried to protect itself. She added that if the team had simply offered food and spoken kindly, the dog would have come to them willingly. Had crept slightly closer, though he still kept several benches between himself and the cage. He asked how could possibly know what the beast was thinking. He said humans could not read animal minds. Smiled at him. She explained that humans had spent thousands of years learning to understand dogs. The relationship went back to ancient times when humans and wolves first began working together. Over many generations, wolves became dogs and dogs became part of human families. She said that understanding a dog was not magic. It was simply paying attention to what the animal was telling you. She pointed to the dog's body language as she spoke. She showed them how the relaxed ears meant the dog felt safe. The wagging tail showed happiness. The exposed belly was a sign of complete trust. Every part of the dog was communicating and had learned to read those signals since childhood. Asked why any species would invest so much effort into understanding a predator. He said it seemed like a waste of resources that could be spent on more practical matters. On his, dangerous creatures were eliminated or avoided. The idea of befriending them was unthinkable. Stood up slowly, and the dog immediately pressed its nose against the bars to stay close to her. She explained that dogs gave back far more than they took. They guarded human homes and families. They helped hunt for food in ancient times. They provided companionship and love without condition. She said that a dog would die to protect its human family. That kind of loyalty was worth more than any practical consideration. The cadets murmured among themselves. The translator devices buzzed with a dozen different languages as they tried to process this information. A creature that would die for another species. The concept seemed impossible to most of them. Asked Instructor if she could open the cage. She promised that the dog would not hurt anyone as long as people remained calm. She said the animal needed to stretch its legs and would feel much better outside the small container. Hesitated. His compound eyes shifted between and the dog several times. Finally, he ordered the security guards to stand ready. He told that if the beast attacked anyone, she would be held responsible. She would face disciplinary action and possible removal from the academy. Accepted the terms without argument. She knelt beside the cage and found the locking mechanism. The dog watched her with bright, eager eyes. Its whole body trembled with excitement as it realized what was happening. The lock clicked open and swung the cage door wide. The dog bounded out immediately, and several cadets screamed in terror. But the animal did not attack. Instead, it jumped up and placed its front paws on shoulders. It licked her face with its large pink tongue, covering her cheeks in slobber. Laughed and wrapped her arms around the dog's neck. She hugged it tightly and told it what a good boy it was. The dog's tail wagged so fast it was almost a blur. It made happy whining sounds and tried to lick every part of her face it could reach. Watched this display with his mouth hanging open. He had never seen anything like it. A predator with teeth that could tear flesh was acting like an excited child. He asked if all Earth creatures behaved this way with humans. Gently pushed the dog down and told it to sit. The animal obeyed instantly, dropping onto its hindquarters and looking up at her with adoring eyes. She explained that not all Earth creatures were friendly. Humans had only domesticated certain species over time. Dogs, cats, horses, and many others had become partners with humanity. But there were still plenty of dangerous animals on Earth that would kill a human without hesitation. This statement made the cadets even more confused. They asked how humans decided which creatures to befriend and which to avoid. Said it was a matter of mutual benefit. The animals that worked well with humans were treated as family. The ones that did not were respected from a distance. Approached a few steps closer. He studied the dog with new eyes. He noticed how it stayed close to, how it watched her face for signals, how it seemed to anticipate her movements. He admitted that he had never seen such coordination between different species. Told the dog to lie down and it dropped to the floor immediately. She told it to roll over and it flipped onto its back with its legs in the air. She told it to shake, and it offered her one paw to hold. Each command was followed without hesitation, performed with obvious joy. The instructor asked how long it took to train such behaviors, explained that dogs learned quickly because they wanted to please their humans. This particular dog had clearly been well trained before it was lost. Someone had spent many hours teaching it and loving it. She wondered if the owner was still searching for their missing companion. The training hall had transformed. What had started as a lesson in fear had become something entirely different. The cadets still kept their distance, but the terror in their eyes had faded into curiosity. They watched the human and the dog interact like two halves of a whole, and they began to understand that maybe Earth was not just a world of monsters. Maybe it was a world where monsters could become family. The emergency council session began 2 hours after the incident in the training hall. High Arbiter sat at the head of the curved table, his pale blue skin reflecting the soft lights of the chamber. He was old even by standards, and his 4 eyes had seen many strange things during his centuries of service. But the report he had just received troubled him deeply. Instructor stood before the council and presented his account. He described how the human female had approached the caged beast without fear. He explained how she had touched it, spoken to it, and somehow convinced it to obey her commands. He admitted that he had no explanation for what he had witnessed. Admiral Pete Collins sat at the far end of the table, representing the human delegation. He was a stocky man with hair and a face weathered by years of military service. As spoke, the Admiral's expression changed from concern to confusion to barely hidden amusement. When the instructor finished, Collins asked to see the creature in question. The security footage was displayed on the chamber's main screen. The council watched in silence as Morgan approached the cage, touched the animal, and eventually released it. They saw the beast jump on her and cover her face with its tongue. Several council members made sounds of disgust at this display. Collins leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead. He asked the council if they had really called an emergency session because a human cadet had pet a dog. His tone suggested he was trying very hard not to laugh. High Arbiter responded that the matter was serious. Earth creatures were classified as extremely dangerous. The council needed to understand how humans controlled them. He asked if this was some form of psychic ability that humans had hidden from the galactic community. Collins shook his head. He explained that dogs were not dangerous to humans. They were companions, pets, friends. Humans had been living with dogs for over 15,000 years. He said his own grandmother had owned 3 of them, and the most violent thing they ever did was steal food from the kitchen table. The council members exchanged confused glances. Doctor, with silver scales and large dark eyes, asked for clarification. She wanted to know if humans deliberately brought predators into their living spaces. Collins confirmed this was true. He said millions of families on Earth kept dogs in their homes. The animals slept on human beds, ate from human hands, and played with human children. He added that cats were even more popular, and that Earth had over 500 million domesticated cats living with human families. The chamber erupted in shocked conversation. Translator devices struggled to keep up with the overlapping voices, raised one hand for silence, and asked Collins to explain how this was possible. How could a species survive while surrounded by predators? Collins tried several different approaches to explain the concept of domestication. He described how ancient humans had selected the friendliest wolves and bred them over generations. He explained how the bond between humans and dogs had grown stronger over thousands of years. He talked about how dogs had helped humans hunt, guard their homes, and even rescue people from disasters. Interrupted to ask about the danger, he said that surely some humans had been killed by these animals. Surely there were attacks and deaths that proved the foolishness of this arrangement. Collins admitted that dog attacks did happen occasionally, but he pointed out that far more humans died from falling down stairs or choking on food. The benefits of living with dogs far outweighed the rare incidents of harm. He said most dogs would rather die than hurt their families. Doctor pulled up research she had gathered since the incident. She displayed images of humans with various animals, dogs, cats, horses, birds, and even some reptiles. She showed videos of children sleeping next to large dogs, of elderly humans being comforted by purring cats, of soldiers working alongside trained canines in combat situations. Studied the images with all 4 of his eyes. He admitted that he had never imagined such relationships were possible. His species had evolved on a peaceful world where dangerous creatures were rare. The idea of voluntarily bonding with a predator was completely foreign to culture. Collins said he understood the confusion. He explained that Earth was different from most worlds. Humans had evolved alongside countless dangerous species. Instead of hiding from all of them, humans had learned which ones could become allies. The ones that responded well to kindness and training became partners. The ones that did not were treated with caution. The council discussed what should be done with the dog, recommended destroying it to prevent any future incidents. He said the beast was too unpredictable to keep on a station full of vulnerable species. Collins objected firmly. He said destroying the dog would be considered an act of aggression by the human delegation. He explained that pets were not property to humans. They were family members with real emotional value. Killing a human's dog was nearly as offensive as killing a human family member. This statement created another wave of shocked murmuring, asked if Collins was comparing an animal to a person. Collins replied that he was not comparing them exactly, but that the love humans felt for their pets was real and powerful. He said wars had been started over less serious insults. After much debate, the council reached a decision. The dog would be released to human custody rather than destroyed. Admiral Collins would take personal responsibility for the animal until transport to Earth could be arranged. Cadet Morgan would assist in caring for the creature during this time. Closed the session with a warning. He said the council would be watching closely to ensure no harm came from this arrangement. He also admitted that perhaps the Galactic Council had more to learn about humanity than they had realized. A species that made friends with monsters was either very brave or very strange. He suspected humans were both. Collins thanked the council for their wisdom. As he left the chamber, he sent a message to the human quarters asking Morgan to meet him. He had a new assignment for her, and he suspected she would be very happy about it. Named the dog Scout after checking that he had no identification chip. The name seemed to fit him perfectly. He was always alert, always watching, always ready to investigate any new sound or smell. Admiral Collins had arranged for a small living space in the human quarters section, and Scout settled into his new home like he had always belonged there. Word spread quickly through Prime about the human who had befriended the beast. The story grew more dramatic with each retelling. Some versions claimed had wrestled the creature into submission. Others said she had used ancient human magic to control its mind. The truth was far simpler, but simplicity rarely made for good gossip. During the first few days, alien cadets would walk past the human quarters and peek through the windows. They watched throw a ball down the corridor and laughed nervously when Scout chased after it with wild enthusiasm. The sight of such a large predator playing like a child confused them deeply. Was the bravest of the curious visitors. The young had been unable to stop thinking about what he had witnessed in the training hall. On the fourth day, he gathered his courage and pressed the door chime at quarters, welcomed him warmly and invited him inside. Scout immediately ran over to investigate the newcomer, froze as the dog circled him, sniffing at his legs and tail. His scales turned pale with fear, and his claws scraped against the floor as he fought the urge to run. Told him to stay calm. She explained that Scout was just curious and wanted to learn his scent. She guided to sit down on a low bench and showed him how to hold out his hand for the dog to sniff. She promised that nothing bad would happen. Extended one trembling hand toward the beast's nose. Scout sniffed it thoroughly, then surprised everyone by licking clawed fingers. They made a startled sound but did not pull away. He asked why the creature had done that. Laughed softly. She said licking was a sign of acceptance. Scout had decided that was a friend. She encouraged him to pet the dog's head gently, showing him the spot behind the ears that Scout loved most. Touched the dog's fur and discovered it was soft. He had expected armor or rough hide, something suited to a predator. Instead, the fur felt like the finest fabric he had ever touched. He moved his hand slowly, and Scout leaned into the attention with obvious pleasure. Over the following days, more visitors came to meet the famous beast, welcomed them all and taught them how to approach Scout safely. She explained that calm energy was important, that sudden movements could startle any animal, and that kindness was always rewarded with trust. The human quarters became an unlikely meeting place. Cadets from a dozen different species would gather in the common area to watch work with Scout. She demonstrated training commands and explained the thinking behind each one. She showed them how to read the dog's body language and understand what he was feeling. Instructor observed these sessions from a distance. He never entered the human quarters, but often noticed him watching through the windows. His compound eyes would follow Scout's movements with scientific interest. She wondered if his opinion about Earth creatures was beginning to change. The answer came unexpectedly on the 12th day. A maintenance accident caused a power surge in a nearby section of the station. The resulting explosion shook the walls of the human quarters and sent emergency lights flashing. Smoke began to fill the corridor outside. Several alien cadets were visiting when the explosion happened. They panicked immediately, crying out in fear and stumbling over each other. Shouted for everyone to stay calm and move toward the emergency exits. Scout reacted before anyone else could organize. The dog positioned himself between and the smoke-filled doorway. He barked loudly, a deep warning sound that echoed through the quarters. His ears stood straight up, and his body was rigid with alertness. Tried to move toward the door to check on the situation. Scout blocked her path, pushing against her legs with his body. He kept barking, refusing to let her approach the potential danger. Only when the emergency systems kicked in and began clearing the smoke did he finally relax his guard. Had been watching through the window when the explosion occurred. He saw how the dog had immediately moved to protect the human. The creature had not tried to escape or save itself. Its first instinct had been to shield from harm. After the emergency passed, approached the human quarters for the first time. He stood in the doorway and looked at Scout with new understanding. He admitted to that he had been wrong about Earth creatures. He said he had never seen such loyalty from any animal on any world. Stroked Scout's head as she replied. She explained that dogs did not just love their humans. They devoted their entire lives to them. A dog would face any danger, endure any hardship, and give everything it had to keep its family safe. This was not training or instinct. It was genuine love. Asked how humans earned such devotion. He wanted to know the secret that made these beasts so loyal. Smiled and said there was no secret. Humans simply loved their dogs back. They fed them, cared for them, played with them, and treated them as family. The bond grew naturally from mutual affection and trust. Both sides gave and both sides received. The cadets who had witnessed Scout's protective behavior spread the story throughout the station. The tale of the beast who guarded humans with its life became the most popular topic of conversation. And slowly, The fear that surrounded Earth creatures began to transform into something closer to respect. The graduation ceremony filled the Great Hall of Prime with color and sound. Cadets from every member species of the Galactic Council stood in neat rows, wearing the formal uniforms of their flags and banners hung from the high ceiling, representing dozens of different civilizations. This was one of the most important days in the academic calendar, and the entire station had gathered to celebrate. Morgan stood among the other human cadets near the center of the formation. Scout sat calmly at her feet, his presence no longer causing alarm among the assembled aliens. Over the past month, he had become something of a celebrity on the station. Cadets who had once fled from him now stopped to pet him in the corridors. His fame had spread beyond Prime through countless messages and videos shared across the galactic network. High Arbiter rose from his seat on the elevated platform and approached the speaking podium. His pale blue skin seemed to glow under the ceremonial lights. He looked out over the assembled cadets and began his address. He spoke about courage and growth. He mentioned the challenges that every cadet had faced during their training. He praised the dedication and hard work that had brought them to this moment. But then his tone changed, and he said that this year had taught him something unexpected. Directed his four eyes toward the human section. He said that the Galactic Council had always measured strength by obvious standards: military power, technological advancement, territorial control. But humans had shown them a different kind of strength. They had demonstrated that true courage was not the absence of fear. It was the choice to reach out despite fear. He told the story of a young human cadet who had approached a creature that everyone else believed was a monster. She had not used weapons or force. She had used kindness and understanding. And in doing so, she had changed how the entire station thought about danger and friendship. Felt her face grow warm as hundreds of alien eyes turned toward her. Scout looked up at her and wagged his tail, sensing her emotions. She reached down and scratched his ear to calm herself. Continued his speech. He said that humans came from one of the most dangerous worlds in known space. Every day on Earth was a fight for survival against predators, diseases, and disasters. But instead of becoming hard and cold, humans had learned to find allies in the darkness. They had reached out to the creatures that could have destroyed them and built bonds of trust and love. He concluded by saying that perhaps this was the greatest lesson humans could teach the galaxy. Not how to fight, but how to connect. Not how to destroy, but how to befriend. He hoped that all cadets would carry this wisdom with them as they began their careers. The ceremony continued with awards and recognitions. Received a special commendation for cultural contribution, which she accepted with quiet grace. Scout sat perfectly still beside her throughout the presentation, as if he understood the importance of the moment. After the formal proceedings ended, the hall transformed into a celebration. Music played from hidden speakers, and cadets mingled freely across species boundaries. The atmosphere was light and joyful. Instructor found standing near one of the tall windows, looking out at the stars. He approached slowly, his four legs making soft clicks on the polished floor. Scout turned to watch him but showed no alarm. The dog had learned to recognize the instructor as a friend. Admitted that he owed an apology. He said his fear conditioning methods had been based on incomplete understanding. He had assumed that all dangerous creatures were enemies to be avoided. Humans had proven that assumption wrong. Accepted his apology without judgment. She said that fear was natural and served an important purpose. It kept people safe from real dangers, but sometimes fear could also blind people to possibilities they had never imagined. Looked down at Scout. The dog gazed back at him with intelligent brown eyes. The instructor asked how humans had first learned to trust creatures that could harm them. How had they taken that impossible first step? Thought carefully before answering. She said that trust was a choice that had to be earned and given. Someone, thousands of years ago, had decided to offer food to a wild wolf instead of driving it away. That wolf had chosen to accept the gift instead of attacking. From that moment, both species had changed. Trust had transformed enemies into partners. Nodded slowly. He said his species had never attempted such a thing. They had always maintained strict boundaries between themselves and other creatures. He wondered now if they had missed something valuable because of that caution. Smiled and suggested that it was never too late to try. She said the galaxy was full of creatures that might become friends if someone was brave enough to reach out first. Admiral Collins approached and announced that transport to Earth would be leaving in 2 hours. He asked if she was ready to take Scout home. She confirmed that she was, though she admitted she would miss Prime. Rushed over before could leave. The young had something important to ask. He wanted to know if humans could help his species learn to work with their own wildlife. His had many creatures that they had always avoided. Maybe some of them could become partners too. Told him that she would be happy to help. She said humans had experience with domestication that they could share. It would take time and patience, but anything was possible if both sides were willing to try. The farewell was emotional for many. Cadets who had once feared Scout now lined up to pet him one last time. Several pressed their faces against his fur and whispered goodbye in their native languages. The dog accepted each farewell with patient grace, as if he understood what was happening. Walked toward the departure bay with Scout at her side. Admiral Collins accompanied them, carrying her travel bag. Behind them, a crowd of alien friends waved and called out well wishes in a dozen different languages. At the airlock, paused and looked back at the station. She had come here as a stranger from a. She was leaving as something more. She had shown an entire galaxy that the creatures they feared most might become the friends they needed most. Scout pressed against her leg, ready for whatever came next, reached down and stroked his soft fur. She told him they were going home. As their transport pulled away from Prime, watched the stars stretch past the viewport. She thought about all the worlds out there, all the species who lived in fear of their own planets. Maybe humans had a gift to share that was more valuable than any technology. Maybe they could teach the galaxy that the path to peace did not always require weapons. Sometimes it just required the courage to offer a hand and hope that something wonderful would reach back. Scout rested his head in her lap and closed his eyes. His tail thumped gently against the seat. Outside, the universe waited, full of monsters that might become friends and strangers who might become family. Smiled and scratched behind his ears. She knew that wherever humans went, they would never go alone. They would bring their hearts with them, and their hearts had room for everyone.